Thanks, Amy and Julia, for already kicking it off. I'm really excited to introduce the last track here, which on the agenda, we have it labeled as Building Resilient Data Infrastructure. And I just want to reemphasize Chris's point. That word infrastructure also hit me the wrong way because that also means something in our industry. So I'm actually literally thinking of a server room when you say that. I'm not thinking of the other aspects. So let's go forward with calling track 3 Building Resilient Data Ecosystems. My name is Brianna Pagán. I'm also with Development Seed. This is very recent. I willingly left NASA about 2 months ago, where I was deputy manager of one of the data centers. And I just want to start off by looking at the definition of just what is resilience. And here I have it as the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. That has a lot of contextual meanings these days. And I want to kick off by telling you a really personal experience of why I know resilience very intimately right now. And that is because we lost our home in the Palisades fire in Los Angeles at the beginning of this year. And I'm sharing a video of giving you a tour of our home post it being burned down. In the video, we actually did not return to the property until about a month later. Here, I'm actually showing that the fire is still smoldering on the property, even though it's a month later. Many of you, know me from talking online virtual setting, and I'm about to walk you through my office. Like that is where you would know me. That's where I was sitting taking calls. This was an incredibly humbling experience for many reasons. But probably the most humbling is, reflecting on what is the work that we are doing in this room and how did it serve and or fail me in these instances. And climate resilience is just, a topic that should be at the forefront of all of our minds. We were in the Palisades area, but obviously the Altadena fire was equally as destructive. These are just becoming more common, and I don't think I'm the only one in the room who's also experienced these things. What made, I think, these fires so different than a typical fire is the winds that were present. Here I'm showing a video of the fire coming across on our street. What you don't see is that we actually lived on the same street as a fire station. And you don't see any firefighters fighting anything because they couldn't, because the winds were so strong. It was an incredibly surreal experience to, watch the firefighters only able to defend their own building, not able to defend anyone else's property. And an app kind of came up out of all of this called Watch Duty, and it really had a moment. And the power of this app was that it was this central place compiling a lot of different data, but mostly geospatial data, to pass information around to people who were being impacted by the fires. But even with this app, even getting evacuation warnings, people will know that I already had left AGU for a different fire that came within a few thousand feet of our house. This is a different fire that happened a month later, and we thought we were going to be safe because there was just no way that another fire could come through. People who were texting me asking if we were okay asked, what's going on, and I said, quote unquote, it would have to burn through 1,000 homes before it got to us, and that's just exactly what happened. And we kind of carried on our day during the fire because we thought we were relatively safe. I made dinner. It wasn't until our landlord had also called us and was just like, hey, we all have to go right now. And if you're wondering why people stay back, it's because if you live in a fire area, you're just used to coexisting with this. But it's also because there was no updates in the Watch Duty app for over 8 hours because we are incredibly reliant on aerial imagery from planes. But they could not fly any typical aerial imagery for this fire, so there was no mapping update made for over 12 hours. Okay, that led me to write a blog post on LinkedIn post the fire that I said, when our community burned, where was the satellite information? Because this was a great opportunity to leverage satellites, right? If you couldn't fly aerial imagery, what about this entire fleet of satellites? We have SAR, supposedly you can see through, smoke. We have all this technology. Where was it? And it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it was also very genuine of knowing that we have this Star Wars-esque capabilities now of self-tasking satellites. And I just wanted to put the question out there to major satellite providers, like, where was your technology during the fire? I have a PhD in remote sensing. I teach climate resilience. I was a manager of one of the data centers at NASA, and I'm telling you, I could not get information to effectively make decisions in real time. Even post-fire, we were up for 48 hours wondering if we just lost everything in the fire, and there was no effective real-time updates going on. And I think, especially addressing this room, part of this blog was focused on what do we need beyond open data, right? This is not just an open data licensing issue. Even if all of the data was open and there, where do people go to get that, right? There was watch duty. Luckily, it had a moment in the fires. About a month later, we had floods and mudslides also because of fire. There was no app to communicate that. And so I think we love to geek out with each other, and I'm really excited to geek out with you all here too. But when we stay in these bubbles of, how do we make faster data access, sometimes it feels like we're just building things for each other and we're losing sight of these bigger picture uses. And we all want our technology to be used for this. But I'm just here to share my own experience where, believe me, I went to different platforms to download data myself. I can process things, and I was not able to get anything useful until a few days afterwards. And I'm not just talking about like post assessments. I don't want to see any more private companies kind of bragging about, look at how we assess this fire. I know that it's a critical part, but we're missing this link with real-time information. And I really encourage people to look through the comments of this LinkedIn post because it fielded just a ton of great conversations, also from people in the fire industry that made a comment of, maybe satellites also aren't it, which is very humbling to hear. It's not what I want to hear, but maybe in real time, they're not the solution. And if that's the case, then how do we better integrate other types of geospatial data to effectively be useful for disaster management? Okay, so going back to just this term of resilience, again, lots of different definitions of this. Climate resilience is one of them. And I'd be remiss to not mention the elephant in the room right now of when we speak about resilience, we are also talking about the current political and economic implications that we are seeing from the current administration, right? So we already had Chris make a nod to this. We can't just ignore this. And I want to take a moment. Anybody from a federal agency, would you raise your hand? Raise your hand, federal or federal contractor. So I see about 5 hands out of a room of 250 people. So that's what we're talking about when we're saying we need to be resilient. We have been incredibly dependent on the US federal government to fund and create a lot of this technology, and they're no longer here. And this attack that I see on federal civil servants, I can't emphasize how discouraging I find that when civil servants are the people who are willingly taking pay cuts instead of going and working for bigger tech companies. They're the ones putting in the hard work, fighting the bureaucracy. It's not a fun space to live in. It's really easy to come up here and say things like, if NASA just did this, we would be able to do that. If you've not yourself worked in a federal agency, you would know those lessons and maybe understand why that is a lot more nuanced. But regardless of that, we need to become resilient in the current ecosystem. So track 3 is slightly different kind of pace of things. We are building off of all the great tech that's going on and being discussed in track 2, and we want to focus on those non-technical roadblocks that are keeping us from having the impact that we want. These are meant to be discussions. There's not going to be passive participation in these sessions, and that means I'm going to ask that our laptops are closed and that we are fully present. We are so digital already. You want to come to a conference and get things out of it that you can't do at home. And so I don't think anyone here is that important that they can't spare a few hours to just be here fully and take part in these discussions. I also want to encourage that people come as themselves. We want to have Chatham House rules, and that is very specific. People are saying that actually they hadn't heard of maybe that rule, so I can provide a definition. So Chatham House rule aims to create a safe space for open discussion where participants feel comfortable sharing information and opinions without fear of being publicly identified as a source. And this isn't very important right now. We are in, again, just kind of uncertain times, and we want people to be able to show up authentically as themselves and not just representing whatever organization they're in. And because of the current political climate, it can be very sensitive to share your opinions. So I want us all to be very mindful of that. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing where you're from, that's okay. We just want you. We want your ideas. And this is also not just meant to be discussions with like executive levels. I loved Julia's poll showing people's kind of comfort index of cloud native. And I loved that over a third of the room was 3 and under. That we actually need that perspective more than anything, because you will be the first ones to say, what is that? Why are you building it? How does that actually help me? And believe me, the geeks in this room, like, we need that grounding. So I really hope you attend these sessions, no matter your pay grade, your level, and just show up as yourselves and be ready to contribute. We will have varying formats, and I'm just going to go over. We have 4 sessions. The first one is going to be disaster response, very timely topic. That's this morning. All of the track 3 talks are going to be in Wasatch B. And you're going to hear from the experts from Humanitarian OpenStreetMap. We have Cristiano and also leading researchers like Dukshin in satellite remote sensing. And yes, they're going to present, their latest and greatest methodologies in responding to real-time disasters. But most importantly, they're going to share what's not working for them and where there is room for growth. And for that, I hope that lets us have an open discussion for these existing limitations. And I think probably the most important discussion to have out of this is who should be and who is currently paying for this data. We expect everything to be open, but that there's still a cost associated with that. We want that to be federal government. That is not the case right now. So where do we go? Right now, we bank on donations from larger private entities, and we know that that's not sustainable and resilient because we have seen major satellite providers cut support for humanitarian applications. And so I'm speaking to just the ethics and morals of the room. We all know that that's not good, right? We want our technology to be used to save people and save lives. And so what do we do as an ecosystem of people? So that's going to be this morning. This afternoon, we're going to have a session called The Where of It All. And that's getting at this question of where will geospatial projects live in the future? Again, given these shifts in research funding, what types of organizations are going to own these open source projects? How do we reliably create and maintain data needed? And what are these sustainable funding models? There's going to be a brief panel, but then same thing, we're opening it up for discussions, and we would love to have a stretch goal of potentially, sculpting a white paper out of these conversations. Tomorrow, we have 2 sessions as well. In the morning, we have Beyond Open Data, which is asking the question of how do we create data products that can be relied upon by research and commercial sectors. Discussion points is going to include licensing, provenance, data ownership, ongoing maintenance, and to me, the most important part, how do we determine value of data products beyond economic benefit, but also societal good. Those discussions are going to be led by Tom from Mapbox and Mark, Executive Director of Overture. And same thing, stretch goal, we kind of hope that we have a white paper coming out of this to publish. The last track 3 session is workforce development. This is going to be led by Jed and some other folks, just identifying key jobs that are needed to keep sustaining this geospatial data-driven climate adaptation, assess workforce gaps and barriers, defining essential technical and analytical skills, and also just discussing strategies for scaling this workforce. Okay, so kind of bring it back out. Those are the 4 sessions. And I want to offer a great short read here and suggest this. I'm going to leave it on the table. It's a book called On Tyranny. It hits really hard right now. Doesn't take more than an hour in it. And in there, there's just 20 lessons. And I just want to take a moment to review one of these lessons, which is defend institutions. So the excerpt is, it is institutions that help us to preserve decency. They need our help as well. Do not speak of our institutions unless you make them yours by acting on their behalf. Institutions do not protect themselves. They fall one after the other unless each is defended from the beginning. So choose an institution you care about and take its side. Now, if you've ever read Jed's blog post about gazelles and the need for 21st century institutions, I think this lends itself to what CNG is. And personally, CNG is the institution in this crowd that I would like to defend because it is company agnostic, right? I think we are starting to lean towards pulling skills and assets that are just beyond the company that you're representing. And so I don't know if that fits in this typical definition of institution, but whatever this is, I think we are getting towards what this 21st century kind of collaboration looks like. And yeah, I'm going to leave it up here. It's for donation if you want to take it for the night. I encourage everybody to read and reflect on that. And to bring it back out to the resilience that we've had to face recovering from the fires. So I want to just say technology failed me, to be quite honest. But the community and people did not. And so many people in this room came to my help during the fires. I think over a dozen people just in this room offered me an extra room, regardless of their country, offered to watch our dogs, offered to take over some of my work. And that was so heartwarming and humbling, and I felt so seen as a human and not just a person working a job. And it's because I'm really lucky that I've been able to connect with people on a more authentic human level. I know a lot of you from running, from outdoor activities, before I even know what company you're at. And I really want to emphasize, my, action that I wish people take is to show up this next few days as yourself and connect with other people, because this community is what will make you more resilient in your work life and possibly outside of it. So I really love that I've been able to connect with so many of you on a human level, that I can go visit you when I'm in your town. And this really virtual, world that we're living in, this is really important. And again, we don't have these opportunities very often. So I hope you all reach out to other people, meet people you don't know. I think both Amy and Julia and Jed emphasize that. I see a lot of familiar faces, but I just encourage people to introduce yourself to new folks and actually build up your community. Okay, so there's so much goodness going on in the other tracks. You can't attend it all. I'm hoping that from this presentation of what track 3 is, you might have questions you would like to ask, but maybe you can't attend one of them. I want to give a few moments for you all to type up questions that you would love to see addressed in any of those 4 sessions, and I will make sure they are brought up, asked, take some notes, and report back out. So again, if you can't make it, I understand there's just so much goodness going on. Please take a few moments, add questions that you would love answered by these experts. We would love to hear from you. Okay, with that wraps up our discussion points on all the tracks. I would like to invite up Max from Fused, who sponsored our breakfast this morning. He's also the podcast host and the person behind Minds Behind Maps. And yeah, we'll hear from him. Thank you all so much. Excited to connect with you. One last note. Sorry, I would be remiss also to say this. I don't want 200 people coming up to me or my partner saying, I'm so sorry for what happened. I don't need that. It's been about 6 months of that. I appreciate it. What I would love, if you want to come up to me and talk to me, is say, thank you for sharing. This is what I or my company would like to do or help build to make that situation better. Okay, so thank you.